everyone. Welcome to SAP Tech Talks. Before we start, I'd like to say a couple of words about the event itself. The webinar will be recorded and then posted on our YouTube channel. You can ask all the questions in the Q&A field or here. Okay, so our speakers today are Roman Fedotov and Ivan Chebunin, and the topic that they're going to throw light on is streamlining your SAP BTP account costs management. So, colleagues, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ilona. Thank you very much. Let's switch over to our presentation and thank you for joining in today. Welcome. I have you all have a very lovely Friday. So a few words about speakers. Myself, Roman Fedotov, I am lead functional consultant at EPAM and I have over 11 years of architecting solutions in based on SAP ERP system, both ECC and S4HANA, mainly in sales and procurement domains. Today with me will be Ivan Chebunin. He will join us later at on Q&A session. He also has over 15 years of experience working with various SAP technologies and also have several BTP projects in his portfolio, mainly in the governance modeling of BTP solutions. Having said that, let me briefly guide you through the agenda of today's talk. We will start about project itself, project background, cloud, then we will switch over to cloud cost management challenge. I'll briefly introduce you to the various properties of the clouds on the example of SAP BTP platform. Then we will switch over to the brief introduction into financial operations framework discipline. And the main part of today's talk is, of course, the demo of the SAP application for managing your cloud costs on your SAP BTP account, right? And then after key takeaways, you will have an opportunity to ask your questions. You can post them already, as Ilona said earlier, and we will have a dedicated section for the answers. So do not hesitate to do it, right? So let's get started. At EPAM, we started to adapt SAP BTP platform to run various services and applications, both for our clients and for the internal usage. So with this immersive growth in usage and adoptions, it is very natural that costs are growing as well. And at first, we utilized Excel and extracts from BTP platform to perform various analysis of our cloud cost spendings across our various directories, applications, services, and so on. So it couldn't last long enough because it is semi-manual operation and especially alerting various parties involved in the usage of SAP BTP platform is very tedious and manual work. So we gathered together and started internal initiative to somehow come up with solution aimed to aim to simplify or streamline and automate those processes, right? But during our research, we found out that SAP already providing an MVP solution free of charge via open source SAP BTP Cloud Application Programming Model app. So we switched over to deployment and adoption of this solution. And after that, decided that it is very wise idea to spread the word about this app with a wider audience. That's gonna be the main point of this talk, okay? On the screen, you can see the project goals, and I would like to take a moment and say thank you to the project team, to Ivan Chebunin, who was delivery manager, Alexander Razinkin, our SAP CAP developer, and also Alexander Efimov, also SAP CAP developer. Thank you very much, guys. Your efforts are truly appreciated. Okay, let's switch over. So let's start with Cloud Costs Management Challenge. What is it on? And I'll illustrate the examples on the example of SAP BTP. So briefly, let's talk about main clouds properties and implications. And let's start with on-demand access, right? So on-demand access is the most important thing about clouds, because this was the truly game changer driver in the adoption of the clouds. Now you can provision any resource you want, be it a dedicated virtual machine, specific storage, specific services, and so on, just as easy as clicking the mouse, right? So it is always available. And you don't have to spend a lot of capex costs up front. So this is very good for instance, MVP solutions, or scaling down or up your resources as needed, right? But with this property also comes great implication, is that so-called cloud sprawl, right? It is when the resources are over provisioned. So you have underutilized resources, and subsequently you pay for them. So having said that, let's move to a second properties, is flexibility. While you already have your resources available, you can also scale them vertically or horizontally very easily. For example, you can scale number of CPUs, number of your storage available, your RAM available, and so on. But again, it is great property, and this is why we actually love clouds, right? But this flexibility also gives you the, I'm sorry, it can also lead to unnecessary expenses, right? And third one, and this is the most important one, because as you can see, those three properties are mostly related to the topic. I'm not going to describe all the properties and implications. This talk not about the clouds itself. I just want to give you the idea about main properties and applications we're gonna talk about later on during the presentation. And the third point is decentralized operations. Now, when you can procure your resources via click of the mouse using just very convenient web interface, be it SAP BTP platform, AWS, or Microsoft Azure, whatever, it brings this gap between the consumers of resources and the teams who are responsible for the charges or accountable for the resources usage and associated costs. So having said that, three main implications are, which are mostly related to the talk, to our today's talk, are uncontrolled resource growth, unpredictable and rising costs, and lack of visibility and governance, right? Let me illustrate it further on the example of the SAP BTP account configuration. On the screen, you can see that we have very simple SAP BTP account configuration. It is simply just two folders separated by function. For instance, let's say we have sales operations and procurement operations. Within those directories, we have two sub-accounts running several instances or apps dedicated to particular business needs. For example, for sales operations, it is services related to sales approval app or sales availability, stock availability app, sorry. And the same is true for the procurements. We start with this very simple model, but over the time, it is very, since different parties starting to work on those resources and services, the picture can change drastically. Let me illustrate it via presentation. So as you can see, the number of services, the associated costs, they changing over the time, right? And it is very typical picture. So we started with one set of services and one set of costs, but over the time, the landscape has changed, and now we pay a different kind of money, different amount of money, and we have a different number of services, right? Let's take one more moment and focus on a different picture. Now our SAP BTP account configuration variant is separated by geography, function, and project. For instance, we have EMEA, we have Latin America, LATAM, we have Central IT, and we have some particular cost center, for instance, associated with some project which funded dedicatedly, right? As you can see, this example is very simple, yet it reflects the real world scenario you can find in big corporations. So how we can overcome these limitations and implications and various issues related to the management of your cloud landscape, right? How you can trace those resource consumptions, resource provisioning, how you can be sure that today you pay some X amount of money and tomorrow you will pay the same, or the addition of your costs will be manageable. It won't be surprise for you. Those are very essential questions. And since SAP BTP, SAP introduced BTP platform just recently, industry already came up with a body of knowledge called financial operations or discipline, FinOps for short. So let me just briefly describe what is it about and show you the main properties on a one pager about this discipline. So FinOps framework is a set of principles, practices, and tools designed to help organizations optimize their cloud spendings while maintaining the balance between financial accountability, operational efficiency, and balance between between the teams from the business and the tech, right? On the screen, you can see the principles, the main principles, domains and capabilities, core personas you will be interacting with, allied personas, more main phases of FinOps framework, and maturity level to give you a sense how your organization already prepared and on what stage it is currently now, right? Today, I'm not gonna really talk about it in a depth. You will have the opportunity to follow the link and read it yourself if you want to. For the sake of today's presentation, I only want to focus on a particular capabilities of this framework, namely forecasting, budgeting, report, and analytics. These capabilities are automated using this SAP application I'm gonna demo you in a few minutes. Sorry. So now let's switch over to our application demo.
Great. So while Roman is getting ready for the presentation, we'd like you just to take a chance and ask you to become part of our community if you haven't done it yet. So you can use the QR code for this.
Okay, thank you, Ilona. On your screen now, you're able to see the main page of the application itself, right? So let me guide you through the main functions and main capabilities of this application. This is the main screen or dashboard, if I may. It shows you by default a couple tiles with different information. Let's go one by one. First one is the highest credit forecast, top 5 services by the consumption and forecast values. So for example, in this particular demo, it is SAP AI Launchpad, Cloud Foundry Runtime, PostgreSQL Hyperscaler, and so on. At the bottom, you can find forecast breakdown by different SAP BTP objects. I beg my pardon, by sub-account, directory, global account, or data centers. And here you can see on the right, you can see costs and forecasts for this month. Also here, you have various Fiori tiles allowing you to quickly jump to a particular function of the application. So let's move next to the billing verification tab. It is the main tab allowing you to see consumption by specific service, day, and month. On the screen, you can see that on the today's date, February 7, was consumptions for these particular services. Also here you have two buttons, one for data management, allowing you to load consumption for current month, load historic data, delete all technical allocations, delete all consumption data, and delete account structure and all associated tags. Account structure and tags, we will get to it in a minute. Also, forecast management allows you to recalculate forecasts, revert all forecast settings to default. Let's switch over to a particular service. When I click on it, I drill down to a particular service properties. You can see that on the card related to the service for Cloud Foundry runtime, in this particular case, we see service details, costs for this month, a mini chart showing the current costs and forecasted costs, daily change, and where this particular service is used in directory and sub-account. Moving next, you can see commercial metrics associated with this particular service. In our case, it is gigabytes of memory used. And most importantly, here you can see the forecast configuration and technical allocations for this service. Forecast configurations allow you to select various forecasting configurations. For now, it is only 2 possible options, but sometime in the future it can change. So for instance, I want to see the forecasting in the time linear manner. So I change it here, right? And then I go back to the overview tab. Oh, sorry, not overview tab, but billing verification tab again. And I want to recalculate all my forecasts. As you can see, they were recalculated, and now I see a different picture for my Cloud Foundry runtime service. Now let me go back to the service card and continue to demonstrate you the properties of this card. So as we already know, there are commercial metrics, technical metrics. They are not set for this particular service, but you can do it anytime. For example, I click on technical allocation, and here I select technical metric as gigabytes of memory. In this particular case, it is the same as commercial metrics, but for instance, for SAP HANA, it can be different. Also, you can see a nice graph showing you the costs per metric over the time by daily usage and monthly usage, and also combined chart. If I go to the technical details, oh, sorry, not technical details, but history, I can see all the charges and consumptions for this particular service over the time. So I can see that the demo data loaded into this app is previous quarter and also 2 days. So you can see corresponding charges here. Now let's move next and switch over to the costs breakdown. Now it is daily costs breakdown by daily view. As we already saw in the presentation, there are 4 directories in our demo organization: centralized IT apps and services, EMEA, LATAM, and specific project and cost center. But if you have a different BTP account structure, of course, the picture will be different. So basically, you see the same objects as you can find in your BTP account. They visualize the same way. Here, the readings are daily, the date is today, and I can see that, for example, in my centralized IT directory, there are 2 charges made today. And if I drill down to particular sub account, I can find that those charges are related to Cloud Foundry runtime. If I move back, I can see that 2 charges associated to the directory are sub Cloud Foundry runtime and SAP build apps. Also, I can see delta costs to a previous day, but since demo data is loaded only for today, it is displayed as 0. Delta cost percentages and forecasted costs and delta forecasts. You can see the same picture for your monthly usage. Let's switch over to it. For example, by default, the latest year is pre-selected, but I want to go and see the consumption for a previous year or the last quarter of 2024. If I scroll down here, I can see that for October, November, and December, there are some charges again made to the objects within my SAP BTP account structure. Okay, moving next, we have credit expenditure tab, but it depends on the contract you have signed with the SAP. Because, for instance, in CPA account, you have your credits, which will be displayed here, and you will see consumption of your credits. But since here at EPAM we use pay-as-you-go contract, this number is 0. So it's not useful for us particularly, but can be used for customers with different contract. So the cherry on the pie is 2 functions related to cross-charging your costs across your organization and monitoring and alerting functions. So let me switch to cross-charging first. Here I can maintain tags and attach them to various elements of my organizational structure. So for the sake of this demonstration, I already added the tags for our geographies, function, and specific project or cost center. And I also set a ratio for them. So you can see, for instance, that for LATAM apps and services, LATAM pays 90% of the costs and Central IT pays 10% of the costs. Or put it the other way, the costs are allocated in the ratio 90% to 10%. But hey, for centralized IT apps and services, something is missing, right? We can see that LATAM and EMEA contributing 45% each. So let's fix it quickly. If I go to the card for this particular directory, centralized IT apps and services, I can see that only 2 tags are added. Now let's add another tag for central IT. I press edit, create, and select line of business and input central IT with ratio of 10%. Now I scroll down. By the way, all those values will not be lost because this draft functionality of SAP CAP model, you see, updating draft, is supported. So I can just close this window and then resume working on my text later on. But for now, let's save it. I close it, and now it is fine. We see that for centralized IT apps, everyone pays equally, 45%, 45%, and 10%. So having set up our structure and allocating text, now see how we can check how much of the costs are charged per some particular function. To do this, we switch to costs by text and daily view. Again, very familiar screen. You can see that by default, the selected tag is cost center and tag value is project X. And on tag allocation, in tag allocation column, we see project X 100% allocation is done on project or cost center directory. Now I want to check how much should EMEA pay for something, right? Let me switch over to line of business and select EMEA here. Again, we see that EMEA is paying 45% for centralized IT apps and services, and also 90% of apps dedicated to this particular region. And here in costs, delta costs, percentage, and forecasted values, we already see this distribution. So here you see 45, this €2, it is 45% of total allocations for all the services within this centralized IT apps directory. And I can select the same way LATAM, for instance. I can see the same picture, they contribute to centralized IT and dedicated folder, and central IT is paying 10% for those directories, right? It is very convenient to see how much who pays and to which object within your BTP account. But what if I need to have alerting mechanism when some directory or region, let's say, it goes over the budget, right? For this particular function, there is dedicated capability for alerting. You can set up various alerts in the app. For example, I already done it, so let me just guide you through it. Here I go to a specific alert called over budget. If I press edit here, I can change name, measurement type, commercial or technical. I can enable or disable, of course, alert, but most importantly, I can set a specific scope for this alert. So I can narrow down the scope based on the following objects: data center, directory, global account, and sub account. In my particular example, this alert is enabled for directory. Filter mode allows you to filter in or out particular directories. And in this case, I want to include two directories: centralized IT apps and EMEA, or let's put it another way, EMEA and LATAM. Now, threshold allows you to select different properties to set the alert for. You can see there are a lot of them, and you can find any which suits best your needs. In our case, I would just want to see if one particular directory goes all the costs associated with this directory goes beyond some predefined value. So I just select measure costs, operator will be more or equal, and let's say that if it is more than 2,000 euros, then I want to receive notification to predefined email. And below you can see simulation results. So far, there are no services which goes beyond this amount. But hey, let me check if different picture can be set up. And if I go down to the 200 euros, I can see that within EMEA apps and services, one particular service, SAP AI Launchpad, goes beyond 200 euros. So the same information will be sent immediately to my inbox, right? And if I go back, it is just one example of the alerts. As I said, you can set up multiple alerts here. For example, you can set up alert for out of credits charges, over budget, and so on. So it is up to you how you want to utilize this functionality. Now let's go back to overview tab, and I think that's it for the main functions of the applications, right? So let's switch over to key takeaways. Key takeaways regarding the BTP, your BTP global account and corresponding financial operations action you need to be aware of is that first, you have this financial operation foundation where you can find a lot of information about specific framework capabilities, the ways you can set up practice within your application, within your company, and how you can guide the users of your clouds within your application, applying the best practices. If you find this application really useful for you, feel free to follow to this GitHub account where you can find all the information regarding this particular application. And since this application is based on the querying particular SAP BTP service called Usage Data Management Service, also do not hesitate to read the information regarding this service, what kind of information it provides, how you can query it, what infrastructure you need, and so on. Okay, I think it's time for questions and answers. If there are any, thank you very much for listening my presentation. Let's answer some questions if some.
Thank you so much, Roman, for this great speech. And right, we've got lots of questions for you.
Wow.
So let's get started. And the first one is, are there any specific challenges when dealing with multi-cloud or hybrid environments?
Well, of course there are, of course. Since this talk is particularly dedicated to the SAP BTP platform, right? And I have most experience with this platform. So I can't really go into details about these specific challenges, but I have one in my mind because when I was studying about some particular properties of financial operations, they was very concerned about different reporting capabilities provided by different cloud vendors. So for instance, as I already presented, on SAP BTP platform, you have a dedicated service which you can query and you receive the data regarding your consumption, your allocations of costs to your services, sorry, and so on. But for example, AWS or Microsoft Azure, they can have a different APIs, right? So if you're running both AWS and SAP BTP, then this specific challenge is to map those consumptions into one unified view, for instance, to utilize it later via some dashboard. And that's why I really encourage you to proceed to this website for financial operations, because they have a specific initiative where they try to bring to the market unified format for exchange of this commercial information about consumption. So this is very particular specific challenge. I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
The next one is, what is the retention period for collected cost data?
That's the great one. Unfortunately, SAP BTP platform currently provide, if I recall correctly, so pardon if I answered incorrectly, but for daily usage it is about 4 months, if I remember correctly, and for monthly usage it goes back several years or something like that. And this is really a major limitation, because you really want to see your consumption by daily usage, but you cannot really go very back into the past using the current capabilities SAP platform provides you.
Okay. The next one is, custom tags and SAP BTP labels the same?
Yes, it is the same entity within both application and SAP BTP platform itself. So whenever you add new tag in your application, you introduce a new tag to your SAP BTP platform.
Thank you. Okay. And then a big one. How to show business they used 90% of shared services like SAP WorkZone, SAP HANA Cloud, when they request IT to pay 50% instead of 10, in the use case where the business pays 90% and IT pays 10.
Shared services. Yeah, that is the great question actually. And again, as I already highlighted, the SAP BTP platform was introduced just recently compared to the major players in the market, right? Again, as AWS or Azure. So currently, SAP BTP account only provides data for let me quickly check it, because I don't want to go off to derail on sub-account level and service level. So if you use some particular shared services like SAP WorkZone, SAP HANA Cloud, or for example, Cloud Foundry Runtime, there are simply no way to get the information about your particular spendings regarding these service instances. Because for these services, you can get only your usage data, and it's called technical metrics. You can remember just 10 minutes ago when I demoed this APA, there was this distinguishment between the commercial metrics and technical metrics. So for example, for SAP HANA Cloud, within this application, you can set up your commercial metric, which is capability units, or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, right? But technical metrics can be, for instance, usage of your CPU, usage of your RAM, and so on. There are some of the predefined values. So yes, you can set up it this way. Or for example, if you use Cloud Foundry runtime and you have a different spaces within this Cloud Foundry runtime, for example, for development, quality, and production. And all of these spaces, they are using a different amount of gigabytes, right? SAP charges you and provide information only for a particular service, which is Cloud Foundry itself. But within this Cloud Foundry service, there are spaces. And for these spaces, only usage is available. So yeah, it is current limitation, but some of the functions are available in this app? I just demoed, yes.
Let me add a couple of words here. So again, in short, it's a governance model question. So you need to have a process on how do you split the costs. And unfortunately, as Roman mentioned, there is no technical possibility to show it.
Okay. So what are the implementation steps for cost monitor and usage cost for it?
Ivan, you can answer.
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
So the question is, what are the implementation steps for cost monitor and usage cost for it?
Yeah, so this application requires several services from BTP Service Platform to be used. And currently, this application is built using not the cheapest one. I would say that the costly one are SAP HANA itself and WorkZone. So, but there is a workaround, as it is an open source application. You can download the code, deploy it to your environment, and then you can change it to adopt it to reduce the cost. So yeah, steps are get to the GitHub repository that was provided by Roman and download the application and follow the instruction.
I would also briefly mention that the costs are really depends on the infrastructure you already have. So for instance, if you're just starting with SAP BTP platform and you don't have any instances of SAP HANA within your platform, of course, the upfront costs will be higher. But for instance, if you already have some shared database to spare, then you can use this tiny fraction of it and greatly reduce the costs. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Okay, let's give just a couple of seconds whether we have a new one or not. Okay, so nothing. Then if there are no questions left, colleagues, we would like to thank you for this brilliant presentation and for your impeccable manner of answering all these questions. So just to remind everyone that the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, and the link to the recording will be sent in a separate email. So thank you very much for being here, for your great participation, and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thanks
lovely
again.
weekends ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye.